we had the Sarah Boone sentencing today. So we had about a 2.5-hour hearing. We actually live streamed it here. So if you were able to join us for the live stream, thank you for joining us and taking some time out of your day to watch that. If you're not able to join us, well, then that's what this video is for, to recap and break down what happened and talk about the sentence and some of the things that were said during the sentencing. So what happened first was the judge spoke about the motion that was filed by James Owens on behalf of Sarah Boone, requesting a new trial. After all, he listed a number of different reasons, one of them being the emotional outburst during closing arguments, and some other reasons why he felt the fact that there was no continuance granted and that Sarah Boone never waived her right to counsel. Those arguments that we already spoke about and analyzed and did a real deep dive in all the case law about those specific issues that James Owens is arguing on behalf of Sarah Boone that she deserves a new trial. We broke it all down. If you haven't seen those videos, definitely go check that out, because we really explained all the case law that govern those specific issues, and we explained how it seems from my review that those cases do not exactly stand for the proposition that James Owens is arguing in his motion. Now, we did not see any sort of response by the state. The state did not file a response up to until today. Today, they filed the response. So I was not able to get the response. It was actually a lengthy response. I don't know why they waited for last minute. The judge said he did read the response. I did not personally read the response, but if I had to imagine, it was probably a lot of the same arguments that we made with respect to those arguments that James Owens was making. Some of the responses and attacks that we probably argued is probably similar with what the state argued. So that's the first thing that the judge took up, and the judge right away, without doing too much of an analysis at all, just said, we're going to deny that motion and let's move on. So he's denying the motion. They're going to most likely appeal this ruling along with some other rulings that he made throughout the trial, just like any appeal. But like we explained in this in our videos on this specific motion, all the issues that he brought up in this motion are going nowhere. That's not going to be reversed on appeal. There could be some other issues they can dig up throughout the trial. Maybe we can look at them later. After this appeal brief is filed, we can definitely take a look and do some research. But from what we saw from the motion for a new trial, there's really not much going on there. So it doesn't seem like Sarah Boone's going to be getting out anytime soon. So then we moved on to the sentencing. And the sentencing was actually not so long. There's only a couple of witnesses on behalf of George Torres. And the first witness actually was his mother, Blanca Torres. And it was very short, but I thought the way that she started off was so impactful. And that's what this is supposed to be. It's a victim impact statement. And this is so impactful. It was so powerful. As I was watching this, I said, I can't believe that these are the words that are actually coming out of her mouth and that she actually has the strength to say. She said, her first words out of her mouth was Sarah, that she wants to say to Sarah Boone that she does not hate Sarah Boone for what she did. She does not harbor any hatred towards Sarah Boone for what she did. And that's so, to think about it, it's unbelievable to be able to say those. Whether you feel those things is one thing, but to actually even say those things in court. And this is in front of Sarah Boone, who is responsible for the death of your child, murdered him. And you're saying to her that you don't have any hatred towards her for what she did. It's really it's just an unbelievable statement. And I think it was so powerful. So she said that, and she said some other few other quick statements, and then she sat down, and obviously it was extremely emotional and heart-wrenching hearing George's mother talk. Then we had some of his siblings, Victoria Torres and his daughter, Anna Victoria Torres, and they spoke about what this has done for them and how much they miss him and they love him and what type of trauma this was for them and how much they're going to miss him. And as you can imagine, he's very, very young. He has young children, and they're not going to have a father to grow up with. So very, very impactful. So that was in terms of the Torres' family. Then there was on behalf of Sarah Boone. So we had the chaplain of the prison, and she's spoken with Sarah Boone a number of times and met with her, and she said that she's a good person. She tries to help other inmates out, and even if other inmates are not being nice to her, she is still nice to them. And she is just in general a growing person. She's finding God again. And the judge should have mercy on her. So that was the chaplain speaking. Then we had some of the inmates who also testified, who got to know Sarah Boone, and they also testified that she's a nice person. She's helped them out. She's helped them out with legal issues. And from what they've seen and observed from Sarah Boone, she seems like a nice person. So the judge, again, should have some mercy on her. Then we had also, I think the last inmate that spoke was Lana Albert, and she said that she was actually suffering. She's not able to move out of a wheelchair now because she has renal failure. I think it was end-stage renal failure. So her kidneys are no good. And she also was testifying that, Sarah Boone's a nice person. And what she said, which I think was the most impactful from anybody on Sarah Boone's side, was the fact that Sarah Boone offered to give her kidney. So even this is a person suffering from end-stage renal failure, and Sarah Boone was offering to give her one of her kidneys. And she was so upset, meaning Sarah Boone was so upset that she was not able, I guess she wasn't a match, so she was not able to give Lana her kidney. So that was, I think, somewhat impactful, definitely to hear that. Whether people or the judge will believe that all of a sudden she's just this wonderful, gracious person is a different story. But that was actually something impactful. That's something that you want to hear if you're Sarah Boone, something that you want as a defense attorney. This is what you want the judge to hear. That she's not just a general nice person who tries to help out, and people, everyone likes to help out at some point, especially when you're in jail. But here you have someone who's, according to Lionel, who's willing to offer somebody else her kidney. That's a little bit, puts them in a different light. So that's definitely something that would generally be considered impactful. Now, again, you can't escape the facts of this case. And you're not going to. You always have to come back to the facts of this case and how the nature of how George Torres has died was absolutely, completely, totally horrific. And this is why when I was covering this case, as we were live streaming it from the beginning, I said, life sentence is definitely on the table. This is definitely on the table because the way and manner, the way that George died and the way that he was being mocked by Sarah Boone and videotaped and the way that he suffocated to death. It was just a horrific, terrible way to die, locked in a suitcase. It's just, you can't escape the facts. So that's why I felt from the beginning that a life sentence is definitely on the table in this case. So again, there's no escaping that, but nevertheless, to have something positive said about you like this, that Sarah Boone was willing to give a kidney, that's definitely going to help. Then we had Dr. Julie Harper testify. We all remember Dr. Julie Harper, who was the one who diagnosed Sarah Boone with battered spouse syndrome and intimate partner violence. And she spoke a lot about what we expect her to speak about, her mental challenges and the challenges that she felt and faced being part of this relationship with George, and the abuse that she suffered, and the fact that her family gets alienated from her family and friends get alienated from her because they're not listening to her, that she should leave such a relationship when she's just getting abused and things like that. So she testified, a lot about that. But then actually what's interesting is that the prosecution was able to cross-examine her. Now, this is not something that you always see by a sentencing. Sometimes you just have victim impact statements, or you have some statements or letters that were on behalf of the defendant, and that's it. You don't really see, like an evidentiary hearing, you don't see someone take the stand. But in this specific sentencing, that's exactly what happened. People were called, the attorneys were offered to ask any questions, and very smartly, the prosecution didn't really ask anybody any questions. However, when it came to Dr. Julie Harper, then the prosecutor did ask some questions. And one of the questions that he asked, which I think was the strongest part of questions that he was asking, is that you listed, Dr. Julie Harper, you listed all the things that you reviewed, all the records that you reviewed before coming to your conclusions that you're talking about today. And from everything that you reviewed, you did not review the 58 months of records, or possibly, who knows if there's even records of Sarah Boone when she was in prison. And there is a psychiatrist who is assigned to all these inmates to see on their, to talk about their mental health, to observe them, to evaluate them for their mental health issues. And you didn't get, or you didn't feel was necessary, or you weren't given at least these records, or if you don't even know if these records exist. You definitely didn't review any of these records of the past 4 years, around 58 months that Sarah Boone was incarcerated, and what type of mental health issues she was dealing with then. Is she all better now? Is she completely fine? What type of mental issues? You don't even know. So that was a strong point that was brought out by the prosecution against Dr. Julie Harper. So then after Dr. Harper, then we moved on to Sarah Boone. So Sarah Boone took the stand. And I'm not going to play anything from Sarah Boone. If you want, you can go check out the sentencing today and watch the whole thing. But I'm going to kind of break it down for you. She started off by citing a philosopher. I believe this is a philosopher, and I may get the name wrong, but it's Kintu Sukoroi. So Kintu Sukoroi. And she talked about how this person, philosopher, apparently, said about that there's a certain way to create art where something has cracks and abnormalities, and you cover it over in gold. And the gold makes it that it doesn't cover up the cracks, doesn't cover up the damage. However, it brings the damage out in a better light by covering with gold. And what she said, waxing poetic, was that in this case, the forgiveness is the gold. So even though everyone here is suffering and is damaged from what happened, but by coating all this damage with forgiveness, that will be the gold that will make these cracks not cover them up, but shine forth. Okay, so that was her initial statement. And then she moved on to talk about the damage that George and the entire Torres family inflicted on her. This is not her showing remorse. This is her showing how much damage she endured and how much pain and suffering she endured at the hands of George Torres and the Torres family. So she spoke a lot about that. And she went through in detail the different things that George did to her, like stabbed her and raped her and grabbed her by the hair and dragged her downstairs and didn't let her sleep and made her life miserable and beat up her animals and was mean to them. Gone every single thing she went through, what George did to her. So that was what she spent a lot of time on. And then she also spoke about the damage that social media did to her. Channels like this, that the social media has blood on their fingertips, blood on their keyboards, on their laptops, for reporting on this and for making her seem like a person that really she isn't. And that was actually something else that one of the other inmates talked about, how social media has turned her into this monster when really she's a good person. And this is what Sarah also was picking up on, that the social media has created her and created a monster out of her when really she is a nice, normal person who was just damaged by all of the actions that George Torres took against her. And because she was going through this battered spouse and these mental health issues, that was really the problem here. So really, she is the victim. Nobody else is really the victim, but she is the victim. Now, she did say that George obviously is also a victim in this case, but she was definitely trying to show everybody that really she is the victim, and all these evil people on social media who are reporting on this case are doing it. Now, of course, in social media world, there's a very, very big world, and there are some people that definitely will take a side and will try to make the person as a villain and try to make them as disgusting as possible, and they'll take that side. Some people take the other side, but some social media platforms, including ours, are just objective. We're just reporting on what happened, and we're analyzing what happened. We're talking about the motions and the case law, and we're talking about things like that. We're not villainizing anybody. We're just talking about the arguments that are made. And if there's a weakness in your argument, well, I'm sorry, but we're going to point that out. That's part of what we're doing here to help educate people about what's going on. So, but again, with this broad brush, just brushing all the social media personalities as one big problem, and we all have blood on our hands. So that was another theme that she was talking about. And then eventually she actually did, at the end of her statement, get to the part where she asks forgiveness from the Torres family. So she did get to that all the way at the end, and she did say that she's sorry. It just took a long time to get there. And then also her first major part of her speech was about how she's the victim. So that was what happened. And then after that, they went to arguments. And what happened in arguments is that the prosecution wanted right away to say that the judge shouldn't really consider the fact that there was an offer for 15 years for Sarah Boone on this case, which was a absolute sweetheart of a deal, which every single commentator, every single lawyer was talking about, most likely. I didn't see them all, but I would imagine that any lawyer that looked at this case and said, wow, she's being offered 15 years. How did she get that offer? I mean, if James Owens would have convinced her to take that offer, he would have went down in history as being one of the greatest lawyers to be able to get one of the greatest deals for a case against someone where the prosecution has them dead to rights and they can be facing a life sentence, and he got them down to 15 years, and he was not able to do that. So again, the client is the one who makes the ultimate decision. So although James Owens maybe strongly suggested it and recommended that she consider it, she decided on her own, perhaps, or with counsel, that no, she's going to try this case and maybe she'll have a better chance of getting a full acquittal. But any lawyer who's covering this case said that was ridiculous. Now, the prosecution has to do something with that, because the judge could potentially be thinking, look, the prosecution just wanted 15 years. Okay, so there was a conviction. Okay, we'll give her 20, 25, 30. All right, the prosecution should be happy with that. So right away, the prosecution had to get up and argue and say, no, the reason why we offered 15 years was that she would take responsibility. She would take responsibility for her actions. That's what this is. It's consideration. This is a contract. Consideration is just a legal term for something that you need for a contract. So here it's essentially a contract, right? We're offering you a plea, and in exchange for this sweet of a deal, 15 years, you're going to plead guilty. You're going to take responsibility for what you did. And that was what the prosecution was arguing, and she did not take responsibility. And still today, the prosecution argues she did not take responsibility for her actions, and therefore the judge, you should not consider the 15 years. We believe that she is deserving of a life sentence. The same way she gave the Torres family a life sentence, that they have a life sentence without George, and she actually murdered George herself, so George himself got a death sentence, and now there's a life sentence on all the Torres family. Well, so too Sarah Boone should get a life sentence. And James Owens tried to argue back, and he said that no, there was a 15-year, there definitely was an offer on the table. And considering everything that Sarah Boone was going through during that time and her mental issues, he also, by the way, I didn't speak about this, but he also filed a motion to depart from the statutory requirements or the sentencing in this case. And, if you meet certain criteria, then you could have a departure, have a lower than what the statute requires. And he argued a very, very bare bones motion, like we've seen in the past, filed. And he requested that she should we have a departure from that, and she should have a less of a sentence for that, because of certain arguments that he made. That she has some mental health issues, and the way that this was an unsophisticated way of dying, different elements in the statute, but he didn't really develop them as he probably could have or should have if you're going to argue for a departure from the statutory requirement. So he's arguing again that she was suffering since she has these issues. She had this pattern of abuse. She has a battered spouse syndrome, all the things that Dr. Julie Harper testified to, and everything that she's gone through. So therefore, he believes that there should be a very minimal sentence of, maybe 15 years or something like that. So that was James Owens' argument back. The judge on the bench, which I spoke about, sometimes the judge will take a little bit of a break, says, I have to think about this. I want to go through the materials. But the judge says no, after reviewing right away, after the argument, said after reviewing everything, all the arguments and hearing the impact statements and hearing from on behalf of Sarah Boone, the inmates, hearing everything and taking everything in consideration, the sentence that the court is imposing is life. And in Florida, just something that I realized is that in Florida, there is a specific act, the Truth in Sentencing Act, which essentially says that any life sentence is life without parole. So Sarah Boone's sentence, essentially, if you're not used to the Florida jurisdiction and you're thinking, wait, is this life with parole, with the possibility of parole, or life without the possibility of parole? Life is life without parole. And that is what the Judge Cranick, issued the sentence of this court, that Sarah Boone is sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. So that is how the hearing ended, and that's it. They took Sarah Boone back to the prison. Now, the next thing we're going to be hearing from Sarah Boone is most likely an appeal, and that's going to be the next topic of conversation, but that's not going to be for a little bit of a while. So we got some other things to focus on. We can kind of put Sarah Boone a little bit to rest now that we have the sentence, and I think a lot of people agree with the sentence. Definitely the way that George Torres has died, the manner and how he died, the nature and how he died was just absolutely, completely, and totally horrific, and definitely deserving of a life sentence. So that's what she got. She got life without parole. So that's going to be it for now. Hopefully this was a good, quick recap of what you need to know about the Sarah Boone sentencing. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, like, and we will see you next time.